Let's get more now on the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago, which the former president has dismissed as an attack by radical left Democrats. The Justice Department is investigating the discovery of classified papers that were taken to Mr. Trump's Florida estate after his presidency ended, instead of being transferred to the National Archive as required by law. In the last few minutes, a court has ruled that the powerful Ways and Means Committee of politicians in Washington has been granted permission to view the former president's tax records. Well, we can speak now to Jason Miller, who was the chief advisor, or a very senior advisor certainly, for the Donald Trump 2016 presidential campaign. Remained advisor till pretty recently, to be honest. It's good to have you here with us on this story. And for the FBI to move in like this, they must have some pretty good information. What were these documents? What do the documents relate to, do you think?
Well, this is a pretty egregious example of politicization when it comes to the law enforcement and criminal justice system in the United States. So after a presidency, there are certain documents that are handed back over to national archives. Those are filed away and stored. Usually those are kept for 12 years. Then many times they're made public, depending on what they were. There was a concern that there were a number of boxes that were kept at Mar-a-Lago that were mistakenly transferred to the president's residence after he left the White House. Those had been returned. The president's team has been working with the DOJ on any follow-ups that they had, saying that they're willing to help them out as far as there are any follow-up questions, things of that. So the fact that the FBI came in a very politicized raid and did this can only be done for one reason, and that's to try to hurt President Trump on politics. The undermining that we're seeing here of our entire Constitution is pretty egregious.
But hang on, the prosecutors think there's something going on here. The FBI clearly think there's something going on here. And the FBI have been able to persuade a judge that it's possible that a crime has been committed here.
Well, and that's a sad reality about the American justice system, is you can always find one judge who's going to agree with whether it be rogue agents or politicized Department of Justice. That's just the sad reality. Fact of the matter is, President Trump has not been accused and has not been charged with doing anything wrong. And so, again, going back to the point that his legal team had been working with the DOJ and said, we're an open book. If there's any follow-up that you need, any other aspect that you're trying to get to the bottom of, we'll work with you on it. So to go in, to send in these agents, to go in and crack open his safe, I mean, this is a former president of the United States. You expect to see this in Venezuela or Cuba. You don't expect to see it in the United States.
So are you honestly saying this is a political conspiracy?
Oh, I don't think it's...
Because if it's a political conspiracy, it involves prosecutors. It involves the FBI, the head of which was appointed by Donald Trump. It involves, most likely, his own attorney general. It involves a judge, as I was just saying. Well, I mean, it beggars belief that
it's not a conspiracy, Mark. It's not a conspiracy when it's out in the open. I do think that there's a political element in the DOJ. And keep in mind what President Trump has had to deal with from the FBI ever since he first ran for office, whether it be Jim Comey, whether it be Page and Strzok, of course, the FBI officials that were texting back and forth with each other. President Trump has made them a little bit famous. But we've seen the impeachment 1, impeachment 2, the Russia witch hunt. This is just the latest
documents.
example.
Why did he take 15 boxes of documents to Mar-a-Lago in the first place?
So a couple things on that. I don't have firsthand knowledge about, say, for example, what was in the documents. One of the things to keep in mind, a lot of times...
They were classified because the Department of Justice got them back and subsequently said they contained classified documents.
Well, keep in mind that there are different levels of classification. Anyone can go through, anyone in the intel community, and just mark TS or top secret on something, even if it's innocuous, if there's nothing that's actually sensitive to it. If it has SCI after the TS, then that means that something actually sensitive. What we don't know is actually what was there. Could have been transferred by mistake, could have been something the president thought he had already declassified. That's important to keep in mind as well.
But he has previous on this. If you believe Maggie Haberman of the New York Times, he has on 2 or 3 occasions tried to flush documents down the toilets at the White House. And she is producing a book and claims to have photographs
I saw the pictures
of documents with Donald Trump's handwriting. Why does he want to get rid of documents like this? Why does he want to stash away documents at Mar-a-Lago?
Well, let's go and separate them out, because what we don't know is what those documents or those pictures allegedly were with the Louvre, for example. So I've seen the president. I've been with him when he gets done reading an article and he rips it in half to remind himself that he's done reading it. He'll toss it to the side. And so there's not really a deeper thought that's been put into it. We don't know what were actually in those boxes. And again, they could have been very innocuous. They could have been anything from notes from a foreign leader to some memento. But the fact is, unless the FBI comes back or the DOJ comes back and says there was TS-SCI, which is the secure compartmented information, unless they come back and say that, which I think is pretty notable they haven't, then I think this is pretty ridiculous.
But it's all catching up with him, isn't it? If you now have he's got to give up his tax records to the Ways and Means Committee, this House of Representatives committee. He's been resisting that. I don't know, why has he been resisting that?
Well, because ultimately the Democrats that are running the committee are just going to go through and try to make his life miserable, to attack him. Mark, do you think that it's just a coincidence that all this is happening as President Trump is winning straw polls, showing that he has a firm grip on the Republican Party, and there is other polling out there showing that he would beat Joe Biden in a head-to-head in a rematch? Look, I think President Trump is going to run again in 2024.
You think he will?
I think he will. I've counseled him that he should have announced already. I think the quicker he goes and does it, I think the better. So all of this happening, this isn't by accident. The January 6 hearings that are going on.
Well, this is the issue. That is the big issue, isn't it? I mean, there was pretty damning evidence in those hearings, and there are now calls for a criminal investigation.
Well, with regard to the hearings, of course, there were things that he was criticized on politically as far as how quickly he acted and things of that nature. But again, he has not been charged with anything. They have not referred anything for him to be charged.
But it's what he knew at the time, and you've got this evidence from Cassidy Hutchinson, for instance, who was an aide. But let me just put the case. I mean, she said that he knew the crowd had weapons, but he didn't care. They're not here to hurt me. Take away the security screening machines, he said.
So President Trump has said that's not true. And with regard to Cassidy Hutchinson, her entire story
She was on oath.
Hold on. But she's very young. She's very impressionable. And also, too, when you're talking about someone's memory, that can get a little bit bumpy. So, for example, she repeated a secondhand story that President Trump supposedly leaped from the back seat of the Beast on that day, the presidential limo. He wasn't even in the presidential limo. So people hear things secondhand. They go and repeat it. And again, she's young, she's an impressionable, because there are also text messages of her laughing about the January 6th committee and saying the whole thing was political.
Pence hanging when they were chanting Pence should be hanged.
But that wasn't President Trump.
But no, President Trump apparently said, according to some of the evidence that made an aside saying it's too good for him and stuff like this. I mean...
So I spoke with the president that morning on January 6th, and I spoke with him in the evening. And I know President Trump, he would not have cheered on people saying something like that about his vice president. They may have disagreed.
Here's the point.
He may have thought that they would have, Vice President Pence should have acted differently, but he would never go and encourage lawlessness.
Here's the point. You say he's going to run again.
Yes.
When did you last speak to him? Do you know that he's going to run again?
If I was a gambling person, I would bet that he is going to run. I spoke with him last week. We had dinner 2 weeks ago. I'm not going to call him from the UK because seeing what the FBI and DOJ are doing, I'm sure they'd be tapping my phone. Right. So I'm not going to call him internationally.
But here's the point. Can you really have a president who is accused of fomenting an insurrection and who still does not accept that he lost the election in 2020? Can you really have a president like that running again for office?
Absolutely, because we had the greatest economy in American history. We did not have inflation. There were no new wars that the U.S. had entered into. Now you look at what's happening with Ukraine, with China and Taiwan.
This is about democracy. This is not about Ukraine. It's not about, the economy or unemployment. This is about the very fundamental base of American democracy. And he is saying, I did not lose an election. And he is insisting now still at rallies, I did not lose an election. When quite patently, is there any evidence that you have seen that that election was unfair?
So I think that the election was legally rigged in the way that they changed the rules.
What do you mean legally rigged?
They changed the rules, the voting rules, in the middle of the game.
Well, for both sides. I mean, I'm talking about actual rigging of an election. Republicans were saying this third world country, it's third world rigging.
So I did see.
Where is the no evidence? I've not seen any evidence at all.
So There were a lot of examples of fraud and irregularities on Election Day. I did not see enough on Election Day that would have tilted the election. I've been very clear about both when I talked to the committee.
So Biden won the election?
Biden did win the election.
Biden did win the election?
Biden did win the election.
OK. Did you tell President Trump, as his senior advisor, that Biden has won this election?
So I had a number of conversations with the president. We talked through as the data was coming through.
Did you tell him that Biden has won this election, give it up? Did you say that?
Because President Trump had a number. Hold on, he had a number of legal challenges to go and take on the issue and the fact that they had legally rigged it. That was available to him to go and exhaust all of those, which I said you should, because they did go and change the rules in an unconstitutional manner in the middle of the game. And so ultimately, at the end, when I had the conversation with President Trump on January 6th and said we got to get this statement out, saying we're going to have an orderly transition, the other guy's coming in 2 weeks.
But he's still not accepting it. He's still not accepting it. How can you still support a man on which who you have a fundamental disagreement with over whether an election was won or not? I mean, this is not small stuff, is it? To be fair, you think Biden won that election. Donald Trump is convinced he didn't. So presumably you can't support him during another election campaign.
No, of course. I'll be there to help President Trump because I believe that he's a strong leader for the United States. I think that what he did on taking on the establishment, taking on the swamp, whether it be the better trade policies, better tax policies, actually standing up and coming up with better solutions against these
Why hasn't he accepted that he lost the election, do you think? Well, I mean, because he could. He could even now he could say, I accept that I lost that election.
Mark,
and more Republicans might then have better things to say about it.
Important thing, though. I think a lot of folks, particularly with the audience here in the UK, might not realize that our U.S. Constitution lays out that all election law changes for the sake of having presidential elections need to be made by state legislatures. There were a number of states, democratically controlled states, that went and circumvented that. They had executives, whether it be county executives or mayors, that changed the system, and they sent out hundreds of thousands or millions of ballots.
But a rigged election, no. I mean, you accept that because you think. But can I just ask you?
I do think,
we're running out of time.
I do think legally rigged is a very fair description.
I don't know what legally rigged means. But just the New York Post supported Donald Trump. It now doesn't support him. It said recently he is unworthy to be this country's chief executive again. Do you not agree that the man you say you're going to support if he runs, and you say he will run, do you not agree with them that he's unworthy to run again?
Completely disagree. He didn't have the newspapers or the endorsements or the elected officials behind him in 2016 when he first ran, and he's never had the strong backing of the establishment. Look, I think ultimately he has a strong connection with his base. People know that he's fighting for them. And as we look around the world with everything that's happening today, I think a lot more people would say, you know what, that's fine if we have a couple of mean tweets. Maybe people might disagree on a couple things on the personality. At least he's a real leader. A lot better than what we have right now in the White House.
OK. And you'll be working with him, joining his campaign team?
I'm running Getter, fastest growing social media company in history. So I don't know if I'll step away from that, but I'll be there helping him.
So you're supporting him and you've got to plug in.